Welcome to the Saturday Cadence podcast. I'm Blake Biscardi, and remember, the Saturday Cadence podcast is the heartbeat of college football. The 2025 college football season is shaping up to be an exciting year, and we've got Brett Ciancia from Pick Six Previews joining us on today's show to discuss his latest annual magazine full of incredible analysis, outlooks, previews, and predictions. This is the best magazine on the market. Highly encourage you guys to get this. David and I are honored to have you with us tonight. Brett, thank you for joining us. And why don't you give everybody a quick introduction where they can find you on social media, your website, and everything, and we'll hop right into today's show.
Well, thanks, Blake and David, for having me on, and appreciate that intro. Yeah, it's magazine season over here at Pick Six Previews. The 14th annual edition is out. We have the digital copy available. We have the hard copies being mailed out. Just sent another truckload of magazines out yesterday. Really excited for that. And it covers all 68 Power 4 teams plus Notre Dame. I try and balance it between my advanced stats, but also going position by position, talking to coordinators, talking to head coaches, trying to give you the most comprehensive look at these teams heading into the season. So, you can find that at pick6previews.com. That's all spelled out. You can find us at Twitter or on Twitter at Pick6Previews. We have a couple sample pages up there, some testimonials. You can check that out.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. And for everybody listening, I am a customer of this for a long time. I look forward to Brett's magazine every single year. Buy that instantly. And Brett, let's hop into some of your outlooks for 2025 here. And we're going to start with the big question that's pretty much surrounding this season. Normally, we're at this point in July and August about to head into fall camp. We have a pretty good idea of who those top teams are, that maybe they've been a little bit separated from the pack. But that doesn't seem to be the case this year. We've got teams like Penn State and Clemson and LSU are the teams that are returning starting quarterbacks. But your other contenders like Texas, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Notre Dame, all replacing starting quarterbacks. So there's a lot of fresh faces in these positions. So, Brett, is there really an elite team in college football this year? Is there an elite group of teams in your judgment? How do you see that as we sit here in the early goings before we get into the season, actually see results on the field?
Yeah, well, for the most, the last decade or so, we've had the dynasties. We've had the Nick Saban dynasty, the Dabo dynasty, and now a little bit of Georgia the last couple of years. Ohio State's been a constant. So it's really been those four. And you could have called those your elite teams every year. But I think it's widened a little bit to maybe a top 8. And it's a little bit different if you're trying to pick a national champion nowadays, because in the old, the old BCS or the old 4-teamer, you pretty much had to pick an undefeated team. You had to really pick a team that's going to run the table, win their conference outright, and make it into a 1 versus 2 or a 4-teamer. But now look at a team like Ohio State or Oregon, where they lose 18, 19 starters. They're probably going to go 10-2 in the regular season. Most years in college football history, they would have been thrown out of the mix. But now you're going to have these young teams growing throughout the season. Yeah, maybe take a couple losses, but head into January as these NFL machines. So it's just a completely different ballgame trying to pick a national champion. I'd call maybe 6 elite teams this year. My top 5 in the book, I've got Penn State and Texas, Ohio State and Bama and Georgia. And then I throw Oregon in there just because maybe not now in August and July, but by December and January, this Oregon team is going to be elite. In fact, in the book this year, I put in as my final note that Oregon is my national champion pick, ... in 2026. I think next year they're going to really break through. It's a young team, but if they're a little bit ahead of schedule this January, they could make a run. So that's where I would draw the line, a top 6.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious they're looking at what Dan Lanning's done in Oregon, that they're definitely built for next year. And even this year, they're going to be extremely competitive. And like you said, 10-2 and in the playoff. And Oregon's going to be around. And we've seen Penn State struggle in big games before, but they do have Oregon at home this year. So I think that's a favorable matchup for the Nittany Lions, especially with all the talent that they return, having that game at home in September. That just feels like a Penn State win to me. But yeah, I think Oregon definitely is a team that you want to keep on the radar for the end of that season as we get into almost like what Ohio State did last year, where they just can turn it on right as you get into the playoff, and then it's going to give a lot of momentum for them in 2026. But it seems like, Brett, a lot of these teams are going to start the season one way and finish another one. I know it's like the obvious statement that you can make with college football. It's like, well, yeah, of course teams are going to get better. But I think as talented as these rosters are, they really are going to look a lot different come late November, December, and January as we make this playoff push.
Yeah, absolutely. The two examples I just used, Ohio State and Oregon, those are going to be your biggest developing teams as we go. Whereas a team like Clemson, I think we already may have seen their ceiling. It's really the same team coming back from last year, and that's for better or for worse. Of course, with returning production, you gain more reps, you gain more experience together. Usually, a team grows year over year with that kind of returning production. You see it other ways too, where a team like Illinois, I'm selling this year. I know they returned 20 starters, but I think they've already hit their ceiling. So yeah, these teams are going to grow as the season goes on, and young quarterbacks like Arch Manning at Texas and Julian Sion at Ohio State, whoever Alabama emerges with, will be a new starter. Stockton at Georgia, Dante Moore at Oregon. You got a lot of fresh faces here, and we'll see who has the star power to lead a playoff run. But I like what I have with Penn State there, my number one spot. I don't know if you want to break down. We'll get to Penn State later in the show, but I do feel pretty confident with them at the number one spot right now.
Brett, I want to ask you now, just looking at your top 25, there's a couple of teams that I'm looking at and I'm like, okay, this could be an interesting year for these guys, kind of on the fringe of that 12-team playoff. And the first one you have there is Florida with DJ Lagway now. Obviously, he's a little banged up. I don't know if you know anything about that. Doesn't look to be too severe, they're saying. And then from the Big Ten, USC of course, has struggled under Lincoln Riley the last couple of years, finally looking to turn it around. So, curious about your thoughts on those two teams, Florida and USC, just outside that top 12 in your top 25 for the season.
Yeah, well, first with Florida, it's a good reminder how quickly college football can change in a matter of months. Where look at where Florida was in November. They were about to fire Billy Napier. The fan base was all up in arms. The athletic director had to make a big statement. And then from there, they win four straight. They destroy Florida State in their rivalry game, win their bowl game, and then they sign their best recruiting class, a top 10 class under Billy Napier. So all the momentum in the world. A couple other things happened this offseason. Of course, they got DJ Lagway back. With him on the field, they were a top 10 offense per my numbers. Without him, they were bottom 10. So the plus minus with him is incredible. I think he's going to be great this year. But in the offseason, they were able to get four linemen back who could have gone pro. And that really flips a roster. Two defensive linemen, two offensive linemen were high NFL draft projections. All four are back in Gainesville. So I like their lines of scrimmage. I like how veteran they are. And I like Lagway as your five-star arm at quarterback. So yeah, with Florida, very talented roster. I've got them 13th nationally. But here's the catch: is that they were dealt the hardest schedule in America. I think in the non-conference, you get Miami and Florida State, and I think those are two top 25 caliber teams. Definitely Miami, a top 10 team. But then within the conference, it's probably the hardest draw. Them and Oklahoma. It's a brutal gauntlet. So I don't know if they have playoff aspirations with that schedule, but talent-wise, it's a very strong team. And then your other question was USC. And yeah, there is a lot of pressure on Lincoln Riley this year. And I want to see him succeed enough to get to see next year because right now they have the number one recruiting class for 2026. So I want to see him survive to get to coach that unit. I think it could be a turning point for the program. But for 2025's sake, I think that they're a better team than they're getting credit for. Last year, 7 wins. It's not going to pop off the page, but 5 were one-score losses, and they had late leads. They weren't able to finish them off, but they were really competitive. Now you look at a second-year coordinator bonus on defense with Danton Lynn, second-year quarterback Jaden Mayava, and Lincoln Riley, when he handpicks a quarterback, he rarely misses. So I like what they have there. You look at their schedule. I know their number 7.5 right now. I see at least 9 wins. So that's a team that might be being slept on across the country, but I've got them right there, 4th in the Big Ten.
Well, I appreciate the betting advice there, certainly on USC. And then really the last team I wanted to go over here in this segment would be Texas Tech. Obviously, in the offseason, their bankroll is just unbelievable. They went out and bought everybody they wanted. They went out and dominated the transfer portal, taking in consensusly the number one transfer class. And my question is, you have them at number 16, and I can see this going one of two ways. Either they run through their schedule, surprise in the Big 12, win the Big 12, and then make the playoff, or it could be like a Colorado situation where the locker room gets a little messed up. We've seen it before, like I mentioned, with the Buffaloes. We've seen it with Texas A&M when they brought in that really strong class a couple of years ago. Your thoughts on Texas Tech and why you have them in that 16 spot? Is it just based on the talent that you see there, purely the talent, or do you think that Joey McGuire and his staff are capable of seeing this thing through?
Yeah, well, it's definitely the storyline of the Big 12. And I got a chance to talk to a bunch of head coaches and coordinators within the conference. And it's definitely the most talked about team. I mean, it keeps coming up in conversation. And it's similar to what you were saying. Of course, they look at the star power that they were able to sign. You look at it, they had 12 blue chippers this transfer portal. That's more than the rest of the conference combined. So they're bringing in off the charts talent. But the question that these opposing coaches and what I and you both think about, how quickly can that gel? Can it gel? It's so many new personas coming in, a lot of new stars in the room. So how's that all going to click? I think it will. I think that talent advantage is undeniable. I think it's enough star power to get them over a lot of close games, a lot of one-score games in this conference, more than any other league. So yeah, I'm siding with them on the talent side to make it a run to Dallas. And for Texas Tech, if not now, when? Because this is a generational type moment for them. They really put all their oil money and all their booster money together to get this roster. And I think it's an opportunity here for them. But one last note, too, it's not just the transfers. When you take Texas and Oklahoma out of the Big 12, of course, they're in the SEC now, but you take those mega brands out of it, it's really Texas Tech and TCU are the two best recruiters over the last 5 years. So they've recruited well within this context. Now they sign a top transfer class. I think the talent is off the charts at Texas Tech.
Right, you're mentioning if not now, when, and I think another team we can apply this to as we shift gears here a little bit to the Big Ten. You mentioned Penn State a little bit earlier. I think that's exactly where you can apply that logic for a team like Penn State with James Franklin. We know his history in big games, but this roster seems different. The staff feels different. They bring in Jim Knowles from Ohio State. They've got Andy Kotelnicki as the offensive coordinator. Some continuity here with Aller being in the program 3 years. Both running backs, a great offensive line. They always have a good tight end room. Do you think Penn State can handle these expectations this year? How do you view the Nittany Lions? We know we see them in your preview magazine as number one. You said you feel comfortable with that, but long term for the national championship, why is this Penn State team different than in years past, where you can actually put trust in them before we see on-field results?
Yeah, well, I'm based in Pennsylvania here, born and raised, so I'm as critical as anybody on Penn State. And I hear it all the time from alumni and from fans where they just can't get past the Ohio State hump. That's been their problem for a decade. And the funny thing is, with the playoff expansion, that no longer is the blockade to the playoff. They could really even lose to Ohio State like they did last year and still make it to Indianapolis, still make it to the bracket. But that's last year. Looking forward, I like them to be the number one team. A couple reasons why. You hit on most of my pitch there. I mean, the coordinators, the brain power at both coordinator spots is off the charts. Two of the best coordinators in the entire sport. Offensive line with four All Big Ten guys. Drew Aller, I know that's a hot topic nowadays. He played his worst game against Notre Dame, but the other 12 games he was pretty solid. I like him, like the running back pair, the defense. And it reminds me, in January, they had a lot of guys that could have gone pro on defense, and one by one, they all came back. I know Abdul Carter went, but a lot of guys decided to come back for this year. And in my preview book, you'll see that I include not just the recruiting and transfer ranks, but I've got the mock NFL draft for next year. And Penn State, number one in the country with mock NFL draft picks, with 12 of them expected for next April. So a lot of pro talent here. And I'll leave you with this. When Penn State is the favorite, when they do have the expectations, they're number one in the country straight up. They're 34-2 as the favorite the last 3 years, and number one against the spread as the favorite. 72% cover when they're favored. So I think they'll be favored in at least 11 games. I think they'll be favored in the whiteout game against Oregon at Penn State, and probably in a slight underdog in Columbus. That'd be the one underdog spot. But you're talking your favorite 11 times, and they're flawless when they have the talent advantage. So I like Penn State this year.
Right, I'm with you with Penn State there, thinking that they're going to be favored in those 11 games, and obviously the slight underdog in Columbus against Ohio State. I do think that their regular season is 11-1. But let's talk about one more area that we've kind of missed here when it comes to Penn State. I know they brought in a great transfer class, but that wide receiver unit in that national semifinal against Notre Dame, they didn't complete a forward pass to a wide receiver. It was 3 tight ends and 2 running backs. That's not a recipe for success when you're playing a team as talented as Oregon or Ohio State or one of the SEC teams, potentially Clemson, in the college football playoff. Where can you give Penn State fans this piece that's saying, okay, we may not have the star power in the wide receiver room like Texas or like Ohio State, but we can still compete on the national stage and win those games, even without that deep vertical threat?
Yeah, well, I think first off, some of the teams recently have proven that you don't need the big aerial assault to win a national title. I mean, look at Georgia, their dynasty. it wasn't exactly an air raid offense. It was really strong, running the ball, stop the run, good defense. Notre Dame was that formula last year. They weren't the best passing attack, and they beat Penn State head to head. They almost, they fought tough with Ohio State, at least made a national title appearance. So I don't know that you need to have it. It certainly helps. And, at other places like Clemson and Ohio State and Alabama, they have these stockpiles of receivers. I'll say for Penn State, their strengths are offensive line and running back. I think Drew Aller, I know we keep looking at that last game, that last pass that he threw, but it was uncharacteristic. He was really solid last year. So that's what you're going to build around on offense. And at receiver, they at least tried to address the situation. They went out and signed a couple starters off of other Power 4 teams. They got USC's number one, Kyron Hudson. Who else? Trebor Pena coming from Syracuse. He was getting some all ACC hype. So I think that's a good 1-2 punch. They went down to the Sun Belt to get Devontae Ross from Troy. And then we'll see if their recruiting pays off. They have a former blue chipper, a top 50 kid, Caden Saunders. Let's see if he's going to bounce back from an injury. So they have upside there. It's just a matter of if any of these guys emerge as real All-American stars. But I think the other position groups are solid enough to make a title run.
Brett, you seem very confident in Penn State, as you should, because there is a lot there to like. There's a lot to trust. Now, with this Big Ten race, I know we talked about nationally, maybe it's not as clear separation at the top before, where it was like maybe 3 or 4 teams. You're saying there's a clear about top 8 or so. In the Big Ten, if we apply that same logic, is this race, do you think it's Penn State's to lose where they're head and shoulders number one? Do you think it's Penn State and Ohio State then a drop off? Where's the cutoff point in the Big Ten for you in your estimation?
I see a top 3, and I know that I picked Penn State to win it, but I really see 3 strong contenders, 3 super teams. It's just that 2 of them are younger here in August to start it off, and that's Ohio State and Oregon. There are a lot of new faces, a lot of starters gone, a lot of new starters, but they're recruiting. Both these, Ohio State and Oregon, are off the charts. Oregon, so recruiting rankings and transfer rankings, a lot of the time they're based on quantity, where a bigger class is going to rate higher, but what I did is I looked at it per player and just did the average. If you do that, Oregon's number 1 in the transfer class and number 1 at the high school ranks last cycle. So per capita or per player, they're the best in the country coming in here. It's the most talented roster they've ever had, the deepest roster they've ever had. It's just young. So I think they're a super team. I think that they could grow into it in January, but definitely 2026 for Oregon. So I would say that it's 3. And what you have with Ohio State. 5 stars at every position group, a 5-star quarterback, the best receivers in the country, the best offensive player, Jeremiah Smith, the best defensive player with Caleb Downs. So obviously it goes without saying that Ohio State is a contender. And then we talked Penn State, but I see a drop off after the top 3 down to the Michigan, USC, Indiana, Nebraska. There's a lot of questions at those rosters relatively. So I see a big 3.
Right on this note of Ohio State, they also are in this coordinator conundrum here where they don't have continuity on the staff when it comes to replacing those guys, because we saw Chip Kelly leave for the NFL. Jim Knowles goes over to Penn State. Ryan Day brings in Matt Patricia, which I think is a good addition. It's just going to take some time there, as we previously discussed on the show. And I think that's pretty much the consensus nationally, is that it'll work out. It's just going to take a minute. And then Brian Hartline, they promote him from within. He's been in that position before, but now he's the full-time play caller. When you look at Ohio State early, right, they're going to play Texas week 1. What's your outlook for that game? I know you're high on both of those teams. Both of them are young. I think there's more to trust on Texas's roster. But at the same time, if everything's clicking for Ohio State, or maybe they force a mistake from March Manning, it could be the difference in the game. So what's your outlook here for Ohio State and Texas week 1?
Yeah, well, in the preview book, I've got Texas number 2 and I've got Ohio State number 3. So pretty much a toss-up. I like that it's in Columbus. That would probably sway my pick to be Ohio State. That's how tight this game is that home field advantage might help decide the outcome. But you have 2 quarterbacks making their first real big appearance. I know Arch Manning got some experience last year at times, but nothing will come close to playing the defending champions in week 1 in Columbus in the shoe. So that's going to be a big spot for him. But I love both these rosters. There's so many future pros. Texas has their questions too. They lose a lot to the pros, and they do have a couple All-Americans on defense to lead the charge, but they're replacing a lot of that secondary. A couple linemen on offensive line departing. So they have questions too. In pretty much a toss-up spot, I'll go with the home team here to get a couple, a slight advantage, and I'll go with Ohio State.
Brett, I want to switch gears now to the SEC, and The first thing that stands out to me this year is honestly the exciting quarterbacks that are in the conference. Obviously, Lenora Sellers, Garrett Nussmeier, all the way down Arch Manning. There's just so many this year, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some right off the top of my head. But the SEC and quarterback play hasn't always linked together. Now you bring in young guys who have been with programs for a while, and then transfers like John Mateer at Oklahoma. So let me get your thoughts on that first, the SEC and what is turning into be the conference of quarterbacks maybe this year.
Yeah, great point. And in the magazine, I put an All-American team and I put an All-SEC team, and I do three teams: a first team, a second team, a third team. I had to do something weird. I had to put a second quarterback on the third team. I tried to squeeze as many quarterbacks onto these teams as I could. That being, I got John Mateer and Lenora Sellers both in there with Nussmeier and Arch Manning. But yeah, you could take those four and find another four after that that could be just as good. DJ Lagway and Austin Simmons at Ole Miss, and what else? I mean, even we'll see at Alabama who emerges. Stockton at Georgia, becoming a full-time starter. So there's just so much talent in this conference. Marcel Reed, a second-year guy at A&M. So you could argue a lot of different guys, and you'll see this in my top 25. It's like half of the top 25 is SEC teams. I think it's the deepest conference, and you see that at quarterback too. So yeah, good point. A lot of guys could emerge.
Yeah, even everybody's favorite Diego Pavia down at Vanderbilt, right? So yeah, we'll see about that.
Yeah.
I'm very interested to follow that this season. I think there's a decent chance the Heisman winner emerges from one of those guys. So that'll be something that I follow pretty closely. I want to switch now kind of to the conference itself and the rest of the teams, not just the quarterbacks. And I want to focus on a couple here. LSU, Brian Kelly, I wouldn't say he's on a hot seat, but it's been kind of underwhelming at LSU, some early season losses. I want to get your thoughts on them. And then similarly, over at Auburn, Hugh Freeze, he's been there a couple years now and still looking to get it going. So your thoughts on those two teams?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you gave me these two because I'm higher on them than most. It's an optimistic spin on both. So first with LSU, this is Brian Kelly's moment here. He's had several years to build it. He's got the financial resources to build this program, and they signed the most expensive coordinator in the country, Blake Baker. They signed the number one transfer hall in America, and you know how expensive these NIL deals are for transfer. So, yeah, they've had all the resources in the world. They've had time to build it. He has his starting quarterback back. He's got a lot of stars on defense ready to emerge. So they're my last pick in the at-large category for the playoff. I have them fourth in the conference and 10th overall, and that gets them that final spot in my bracket. So I think this is their year to break through, and a lot to like. I mean, there's really no weakness in my opinion. You could argue the defense, but you got a second-year bonus from Blake Baker. You get Perkins back from injury. It's an All-American candidate at linebacker, and they really fixed their secondary, not just with random recruits, but these are proven stars and all-conference guys from other leagues. So I like what they did in the portal. So LSU, I'm really high on. Your other one was Auburn. And again, I mean, within their context, I'm also high on them. I got them 20th in the country. I don't think anybody else has them ranked in the top 25. And what I like from them is they were a lot better than the record showed last year. You look back at this, it must have been torture being an Auburn fan. They lost 5 turnovers against Cal. They lost 5 turnovers against Arkansas, lost both of those games. They should have won them. They blew 10-point leads against Oklahoma and Missouri. Again, should have won them both. Worst field goal kicking in the country last year. Red zone was terrible. So all those keys to the game were terrible for them. I think those tend to flip year over year, and they'll make the corrections needed in that department. So, but in the stuff you can't change as quickly, the offense and defense numbers, they were top 20 in both my metrics there. So just a matter of converting the points. I think they will. I like their receiver core as one of the best in the country. And the defense had a couple of true, what do you call it? All-American true freshman team guys, all true freshmen that are now coming back as second-year starters. So high on Hugh Freeze, high on LSU. Both your picks there. I like them both.
I'm going to give you two more teams now, and they're pretty related. One from the SEC, and that would be Alabama and Florida State, who, of course, will face off in week one. I want to get your thoughts on both of these teams. Obviously, last year, Florida State just an absolute dumpster fire after a disappointing end when they were arguably snubbed out of the playoffs in favor of Alabama. Now these two teams will play each other, and Alabama on the flip side, an underwhelming year one for Kalen DeBoer. Didn't seem like he and Jalen Milroe meshed super well. Now he's got a chance to start with a clean slate. So your thoughts on these two teams and that game?
Yeah, well, I'll start with Florida State, and it's an example of sometimes it's deeper than all the numbers and stats you could look at. Sometimes it's deeper than just who had the higher rated recruits. Because Florida State on paper last year, their talent, there's no way that was a 2-10 ACC team. There's no way. So I think what was going on here, I think, was the mental side and the locker room side. When you get that kind of a playoff snub in 2023, I think that issue lingered. I mean, they talked about it all offseason. It was at their media days they were talking about it. Some of the captains said it was still a lingering issue in the locker room. So long story short, that's still on their mind heading into 2024. They go and lose their first couple games. All of a sudden, every team goal is off the table. When you're 0-3, there's nothing else to play for if you're playoff or bust. I mean, playoff is out, ACC is out. They lost to their rival. So I think that was a total collapse. Now, for this year, I think that stuff is behind them. They're a much more talented team than 2-10. Also, a lot of great transfers brought in. I think this time they hit better at spots than they did last cycle. So I see a big improvement there towards the upper half of the conference. I put them just outside the top 25. I don't think they've earned that much trust back yet, but they're going to be a lot closer to where they've been than 2-10. With Alabama, this is a team I'm all in on. This is one of the most talented in the country. I'd like their move bringing Ryan Grubb back. He's the ace coordinator that helped Kalen DeBoer make it to the national title at Washington. And these two, they've been together for years, helped Michael Penix turn into a Heisman player, Heisman candidate. So I like that signing a lot. And I like that they got a lot of guys to come back to Tuscaloosa. Similar to what I said about Penn State, where guys could have gone pro and been drafted. A lot of guys came back to Alabama. Normally you watch the NFL draft, you see 10, 12 Bama picks. Last year, only 5. And that's because they're all back in Tuscaloosa, at least defensively. So very talented team, second-year coach bonus. Now they can handpick their quarterback. I like Milroe a lot, but he might not have fit that offense as well as they could have. So I think it's all trending up for Alabama. I have them playing Texas and Atlanta. So number 4 in the country, playing Texas and Atlanta. A lot of people have Georgia. I'm going Alabama and Texas.
Brett, we like to dabble into the college football stock market on this show. And I think we've been doing that a little bit. You're doing a lot of buying here with teams like Alabama or Auburn. Let's look over here at Clemson. We're going to go through 4 teams. We'll go Clemson, Notre Dame, Miami, and Oregon. We'll start here with Clemson. Do they have the talent to win the national title or just the ACC championship? And as we're going through these teams, we're going to go either buy, sell, or hold as we discuss these 4, starting with Clemson.
Yeah, well, I'll sell Clemson. And it might sound counterintuitive because I have them winning the ACC. But if you're asking me about national champion, I don't see that from Clemson. I think that they're a tier below that. I always start with last year. I look back before I look forward. And when you look back at last year, this did not have the stat profile of a national champion contender. They were below average on defense in my numbers, 43rd out of 68 Power 4, barely a top 25 offense. Now, that did improve as the season went on and as Cade Klubnik evolved as a starter, as the receivers grew up. So they're going to be improved, but I just don't see any kind of national title run from Clemson. When they get into a bracket with all these other giants, I don't see them winning 4 straight. So I have them winning the ACC, but I don't see them advancing too far in the national bracket.
That's my reservation there as well. Is do they have the depth or the talent to go to toe for those 3 or 4 straight games in the playoff? And I agree. I don't think that they do. But another team that did go the distance last year, came up just short, is Notre Dame. They're likely going to have CJ Carr at quarterback. They're going to have Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love, arguably the second best running back room in the country behind Penn State's. Do you think Notre Dame is again a national title contender, or do you think they're just going to be a team that makes the playoff?
I think they're more in the playoff contender category. I've got them 8th overall, and I think they'll probably go 11-1, 10-2, and get an at-large spot. But I don't see any kind of national title run this year. Now, maybe CJ Carr, a new 5-star quarterback, could surprise and really open up this offense. But I see it more in the form of last year, which was good enough to make it a run. But I think they fall a little short this time around. I will say I was shocked when I go through and I do my 5-year recruiting average every year, and Notre Dame historically under Brian Kelly and before that, they were 15th, 18th around then in recruiting. Marcus Freeman's got him 7th in the country now in the 5-year, really trending up. They're bringing a new caliber of athlete in the South Bend. So I like them. I'd buy them as a program going forward, intermediate to long term. I'm buying them, but for 2025 in the stock market here, I'll sell them.
Right, the last 2 teams I want to talk about here will be Miami and Oregon. And we don't have to do this in terms of national title contenders. We can do this more program style. So we'll start with Miami and then we'll go to Oregon. How do you view these two programs? Mario Cristobal, I know there's been a lot of talk with him, has been a little bit underwhelming. He's not really gotten things going the way that he could. Now they bring in Carson Beck in the transfer portal. They've got a stud quarterback again, just like they have with Cam Ward. But I think Beck could help them take a step forward, and they have a favorable schedule too in the ACC. So I do see Miami as a playoff team. What's your outlook there for the Hurricanes?
Yeah, well, I sold both of the first two. I'm going to buy these next two. First with Miami, what stands out is their talent acquisition, the way that they're able to recruit. It's top 10 over the 5 year, and their transfer portal is number 3 over the last 2 year. But I look at the 5 and 2, so top 10 in both categories, really impressive, and that really stands out. It might not stand out in the SEC. You're just a face in the crowd with those kind of numbers there, but in the ACC, that is head and shoulders the rest of this conference. It really drops off after the handful of teams at the top. So I see them collecting a lot of wins. And I go against the grain here. I see that Mario Cristobal gets a lot of doubters, a lot of negative press. I'm actually a big believer in what he's building there. Miami hasn't won anything the last 20 years. So it's not like he was inheriting this dynasty from the 80s. So within that context, he's got him playing really good football. I think they were arguably the best team in the conference last year. They should have been in the playoff. Now, you got to blame them for losing a 21-0 lead to Syracuse, but offense-wise, it was elite last year, and I think they're only going to improve on defense this year. So I'm going to buy Miami in 2025 and going forward.
Brett, I want to talk about your college football playoff picks now, and we'll kind of just start with each conference winner, and I want to hear your group of 5 pick too. I think this year's wide open, honestly. I mean, last year, obviously, there were a couple of teams at the top. Ohio State was projected to win the whole thing at the beginning of the year. They ended up doing that, although it was kind of convoluted in the way they got there. But this year, it seems like it's pretty wide open. There's no clear favorite. Obviously, you have Penn State number 1, Texas, and so on and so forth. Um, but I'm curious as to your thoughts on who will actually come out of these conferences in your group of 5 team here to start.
Yeah, well, my conference winners, we got Penn State. I think we discussed that race. It's really a 3-team race, but I'm going to go with the more veteran team, all those returning NFLers. I'll go with Penn State. In the SEC, I'm going with Texas. And again, a 3-team race for me. I see Texas over Bama and Georgia. I think this year with Arch Manning, he's got such a high upside. He's been trained well his whole life. And I think what he brings in the short yardage game and the goal line game is what's going to elevate this offense. You saw them come up short there when they needed a couple of yards. And I know Ewers was a strong passer, but didn't have the mobility that Arch Manning has. So it's a 5-star roster all around him too, as your number 1 recruiter. So I'll go with Texas to win the SEC. Where else? Clemson in the ACC. I've got that as a 2-team race. Clemson versus Miami. We talked Miami just then, but Clemson, I like it enough to win the conference. It's pretty much the whole roster back from last year, and you're going to see that get some gains. So go Clemson there. Now, this Big 12, this is the most wide open conference. I've been doing Pick 6 previews for 14 years now. Probably the most wide open league I've covered. You could argue as many as 7, 8 teams to win it. And talking to head coaches within the league, it kept coming up that who's the favorite or who are the favorites. They would list off like half the conference. So it's so wide open. I went with Arizona State, and it might be the obvious pick, or it just seems like no one's onto it. But they won last year, and it wasn't a fluke. If you look at my advanced stats, they were the top team in the conference statistically. You bring back the entire roster except for Cam Skattebo. It's a big piece, but so many starters are back. And there's question marks everywhere else too across this conference landscape. So I went Arizona State. I have them playing Texas Tech in Dallas. And I mean, I would not be surprised to see other teams like Baylor or Utah or TCU emerge. But I went with Arizona State in a tight one. So those are the 4 conference winners. Lastly, I picked Boise State from the group of 5. I was one of the few that had them last year. If you remember this time last year, Liberty was the big pick. I went with Boise State because I thought the Mountain West was the toughest conference, and they were the toughest team within that conference. And now it looks like the chalk pick, Boise again. So I'm going to run it back with Boise. Hopefully they prove me right 2 years in a row.
I'm going to switch gears here from the top teams to the top players. I'm curious of your Heisman picks. Like I said earlier, I think it's going to end up being a quarterback from the SEC, but for me, it's a dart throw. I'm curious as to who you think will end up in New York here as a Heisman finalist.
Yeah, well, it is. It's a crapshoot always in August. You look back last year, Carson Beck was the prohibitive favorite to win it, and he had a rocky season. It's so wide open. But I'll throw you a couple names. I think Cade Klubnik from Clemson. You're talking about a team that's almost certainly going to be a playoff team. and the quarterback is going to put up a lot of stats on a playoff team will be considered. So I'll go with Cade Klubnik as a quarterback pick. Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State. He's the best player in the country, any position. And now you have name recognition. You have a second year of him. I think he's going to get a ton of stats again. So if you're looking for a receiver, a non-quarterback, I'd go with Jeremiah Smith. If you're looking for a running back, I'll go Jeremiah Love from Notre Dame. Last year, he didn't get as many carries. It was on the lower end of carries, but his per carry average was really high. So I think if he gets a bigger workload, he could go for 1,500, maybe even approach 2,000 yards this year behind that number one offensive line in the country at Notre Dame. And then a couple what I call roulette ships. I mean, guys that are way off the board but could emerge. You got to look at the SEC quarterbacks. So I like you there. I like John Mateer, maybe DJ Lagway at Florida. So those are some of those way off the grid, but they're going to be on talented teams and they're talented players. So John Mateer, Oklahoma, or DJ Lagway, Florida.
Brett, one last question as we close the show here, kind of going in chronological order. We've got the bracket. We talked about that. You got your Heisman finalist. Now let's move into what the results of these playoff games could be. And we'll just go right to your national championship. So what is your national championship game matchup? And then who are you picking to win the title in 2025?
Yeah, well, my number one team's Penn State. My number two is Texas. Of course, Texas has to play Ohio State right away. And if my bracket holds true, they'd have to rematch them. So who knows how that's going to look in January, but here we are in August. I like Penn State and Texas 1-2. And in that ball game, I'll go with Penn State. They're my number one team. Not many weaknesses. We talked about receiver, but I think they might have patched that up enough to make a title run. I love the coordinators. That's my big thing this year with Penn State is the two best coordinators in the country, arguably, with Kotelnicki calling the offense, second year there. You already saw improvements there, a lot more vertical plays, a lot more explosive chunk plays last year than Penn State was used to having. So I like that. And then Jim Knowles, the mastermind on defense. We saw what he did at Ohio State. He's done that everywhere, though. He's done that at Oklahoma State before then. I believe Duke even before that. I mean, this guy is successful everywhere. He's a Pennsylvanian, too. He's coming back to his home state, probably with a chip on his shoulder. So I'm excited to see it. They're my pick to win the Big Ten, to enter number one, and to win it all.
Yeah, Brett, one last note on Penn State there. I think it's just important to have here. We keep talking about this coaching staff and focusing on the coordinators. James Franklin did add head coaching experience to the staff as he brought in Stan Drayton, who was let go from Temple. He's now the running backs coach, notably coaching Ezekiel Elliott at Ohio State and a lot of other top backs across the country. So just having his head coaching experience adds more value to that coaching staff. So again, I do think that's probably the best coaching staff in the entire country. But Brett, it was great having you on the show today. We appreciate you joining us. And again, for everybody listening, you can find Brett and Pick Six Previews on Twitter at Pick Six Previews, and then online right at his website. And please go ahead and buy that magazine. Make sure you're supporting Brett and the great work that he does. It is a ton of effort, and he does phenomenal work. As you can see, he's a true professional. So, Brett, thank you for being on the show today. And as always, it's a great conversation with you.
Yeah, Blake and David, thanks for having me on. Good luck in 2025. Congrats on all the success so far. And hopefully, we'll talk again in December, see how close or what misses I had. We'll see how it all shakes out in a couple months. But thanks for having me on. Thanks for the praise for the magazine. And we'll talk again soon, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to have you back on. But guys, thank you for listening to today's show. We appreciate it. Make sure that you are following us on social media at Saturday Cadence and at T Silver Bulletin, visiting our website at tsilverbulletin.com. So again, Brett, thank you for being on the show today. Guys, make sure you're checking Brett out on all social media platforms and his website. And we will see you guys next time. God bless.